wanna see good news. You don't see on regular TV. From another perspective, something relative to your needs. And we gonna have deep subjects, and we gonna turn the lens. And there's no topic we won't skip. So please don't miss weekly. Tune in to weekly check-in. Weekly check-in. Weekly check-in. Weekly check-in. Tune in to weekly check-in. Weekly check-in.
So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. We are here for another edition of Weekly Check-In with two of my favorite contributors, Dr. I hate when people call me Miss, Dr. Sharice Janae Nelson. What's up? How you doing?
Good. I'm good. I'm happy to be out of DC, out of the madness.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm in Baltimore, so I think I've taken your place. But it's been pretty cool. You know, it's been pretty cool. We'll talk about that and what it looks like.
Yeah.
And then we have Dame Crawford of Uncouth Radio. How are you doing?
I am swell. Good to see you guys again.
I know. We become like the dynamic trio,
right?
Yes. The Fab Three.
Right. Yeah. So it is MLK Day. It's 2 days before the inauguration. You know, as we say in the hood, the spot is hot in the DC area since the January 6th attempted coup. So, but we want to kind of do something a little different today because everybody's news cycles have been reporting and giving a lot of updates of what's been going on, even though we are going to talk about that. But I want to, you know, every year, right, there's always, if Martin Luther the King was alive.
How about if the government didn't kill him at 39? How about that? But okay.
Facts. Okay. Facts. It's undisputed facts, right? But yeah, so if Malcolm X were alive right now, considering everything, what would be said, or what do you think he would do?
Honestly, I think, and you know, we just know this from towards the end of his life, I think he was going on a kind of a different path, and he was actually going on more of a pro-Black path than a we are the world, all lives matter path. So I think in this moment, he would have probably been on the side with a lot of us in regards to it's time to get ours. How are we going to get ours? And I think he would have been trying, I think at this point, he would probably have been in government, you know, probably been up there like a John Lewis type, but with a lot more teeth. And I don't know. That's a great question. Like, I don't know what he would be saying right now.
Don't do John Lewis like that. God rest his soul. What I really believe is that if we look at the tail end of Martin's life, and we look at Malcolm's life, I really feel like they were in parallel paths, wanting the same things, but clashing on how. And I truly believe at this moment they would be in the leadership role. I really believe that they would be in roles right now, guiding young people, guiding people in Black Lives Matter, guiding them about, you know, we hit here this time, it didn't work, hit here, right? And so I think actually what we would have seen is, I think the two of them, I really believe that we would have seen a synergy between the two of them as far as working together. And I think the white supremacists that were controlling the country at the time understood that, which is why killing them was necessary, because they weren't walking on these divergent paths. They were walking on a path that was going to eventually meet. And I feel like it would have met. And not only would it have met in these moments, they would have been full-throated in supporting Black Lives Matter. They would have been organizing around the things Black Lives Matter has talked about. I think when it comes to the insurrection, they would have been in pulpits. I think Malcolm would have been in the pulpit from in the Islamic faith, and I believe that King would have been in the pulpit from the Christian faith. And so I think there would have been a real synergy that we would have seen at this moment. And I don't think that we would have been as divided as we are about the way forward had they both been alive.
I think those are good points. I apologize if there's background noise. Let me know. I'll go on mute. Um, I would say this, like prior to or leading up to several things. I like everything that both of you said. I think that when Malcolm X and Martin Luther King sat down and had a conversation, in my mind, I would say that the conversation was both of their methods and what they thought would work. They had understood it did not work. And I think they were in the process of what is it about what you do? What is it about what I do that we could come together and perhaps move the agenda more? I think that's where they were. And I was listening to Karen Hunter and Gregory Carr,
Hmm.
Howard, and he was saying that at some
Dr. Carr.
yes, Dr. Carr. At some point, members of his close circle had actually applied for a gun permit. So it wasn't that everybody was quote unquote about nonviolence. So I think also King might have been rethinking in terms of getting a gun permit and getting a gun. In this, I think that would have been a consideration. And then another thing I want to say is that like right before King got killed, JFK got killed.
Hmm.
And in the historical records, he went to somebody and said, well, if they kill their own, what do you think
Right.
they're going to do to me? Right.
Right.
It was this very sobering moment. Right. And so when JFK got killed, remember, this is the time where Malcolm X said, well, these are the chickens that are coming home to roost, meaning that America's, and he explained America's violence or America's history of violence in terms of domination, power, and control has then now planted and landed itself right on American soil where they are starting to eat their own, which is exactly what it is we see now, which leads to my overall point is I think in some ways, King and X were both talking about you cannot have this type of climate, you cannot have this type of social political order and not see that it is violent and it actually does not produce anything productive. So
Well, yeah, but King said that, right? Like King said, am I integrating my people into a set of violence that they're never going to be successful in? And I think that is why when you look at many of our civil rights leaders who have joined, right, the ancestral realm, all of them, and I don't think that King was getting to the place where he was ready to be violent, but I do think that he was coming from the place of I need to protect myself, right? Because I may not be in a position where I am okaying violence. I may not be in a position where I'm leading to, a black party, revolution. I may not be on that twinge, but I understand because they'll kill their own. I need to be far more protected. And I do need to think about some of the things that the Fruit of Islam has talked about as far as having your own protection force, which led to them, getting these permits. So I think the idea is that I can be nonviolent as I want to be, but I don't need to be foolish. And I need to make sure that I protect myself because, Kaya, of what you said about the fact that the United States of America is built on white violence. And we have not been clear in our history about that white violence. We have called it courage. We have called it frontierism. We found all these extraordinary words to use to just
Patriotism,
name
even.
it. Patriotism. We've named it everything in the book besides what it is: white violence.
and also I do agree, and that's what I meant. He would be considering getting a gun permit for absolute protection, right?
Yeah.
And also to your point, even though there was a laugh in the beginning, one we all know, or those of us who have studied King and X, they are still today some of the most surveillanced people in terms of the
Yes.
documents, right?
Hmm.
And J. Edgar Hoover got his start surveillancing Marcus Garvey, the movement in which Malcolm X's father was in. So you have these lineages, and we also know that King's mother was very active, right? Who also
Right.
gets assassinated. So, so this gun violence, and then the other thing I want to say is that gun violence has been the rule of thumb in order in this country, right?
Right.
So this is a really kind of interesting, interesting moment. But in terms of me, like checking the temperature of my folk, it is, and I'm laughing because you said this a couple of podcasts ago. People are like, well, they could come up in the hood if they want to,
Right.
with that. let that barricade, open up that barricade,
right.
see what happens.
And to be even more clear about it, right? I'm now back in the South, right? There's not a round on the shelves. There is no ammo at Walmart, at the gun range, at Academy, at any place that sells ammo. There is absolutely no ammo on the shelves. And what people keep thinking about is, oh, these insurrectionists. Yeah, but there's also Black folks down here that didn't bought up that ammo. So to your point about this protectionism, or the fact that Black people, especially in the South, understand the violent nature of whites and are prepared.
There's no ammo in California either.
No.
There's an ammo shortage. Period.
Yeah, I've been like, me and my brothers have been pooling together trying to find places that got ammo. He'll hit me like, oh, they got bullets over here for dot dot dot, and I'll be like, all right, cool. And by the time I get there, they gone. Or I'll go get some, and I'll be like, yo, they got bullets over here. But even the ones they have, like, because there's different bullets, right? So there's the range bullets, there's home defense, and there's like the you just busting bullets. So a lot of homeowners, we want home defense, but there's not a lot of home defense available, because like the home defense won't go through a bunch of walls. Like if I'm trying to shoot somebody that's in close range to me, it won't go go through a bunch of walls in the house. So a lot of those home defense are not available. It's hard to find. It's hard to find even range ammo at this point now. Like the 9mm range is the AR. Like it's hard to find a lot of ammo out here. It's crazy.
While the NRA is filing bankruptcy, might I add.
Church.
Yeah, and all they're doing is that they're just liquidating that and forming a whole new, entity, or maybe they've split and they're going to be multiple entities. That's all.
Yeah, no, they're just going to Texas.
Yeah, they're moving to Texas.
They're moving to Texas. They're reducing their tax liability because Virginia had their headquarters is there. It's in McLean, Virginia, and they're paying a higher amount of taxes there, and there's no income tax in the state of Texas. And so there's no income tax. So they're just moving to Texas, but that to me speaks, right? That speaks to the NRA used to be an organized group. And what I really believe we're seeing right now is, like you said, they're splitting into these smaller groups so that they can go underground or have more of a darker presence. And right now, with a, shining on top of the hill type of organization, or being far too centralized in their organization, and they need to become far more decentralized. And this is the way to do it.
And not only is the NRA moving down south, there are a lot of major corporations that are moving down south as well. Traditionally it was all of the money and the financiers, they would all be in the Yankee territories or outside of the South, and the South would have its particular industries such as oil and agriculture. So what's going to happen when that consolidated money moves to Texas and Florida? This is going to be really interesting. I mean, even Atlanta is getting more industry in terms of productions, right?
Right.
So I'm really interested to see what is this shifting and how is this shift going to play out in terms of politics and long term when the resources go different ways. You have any idea? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, speaking of politics, and you just brought up Atlanta, right? Me and Dr. Nelson talked about this on the other show. What happens is when you get these corporations that move, the people who they move and relocate are the Black and brown workers. The people who do the grunt work and who do the real work, those, and the people who know their system. So they're not moving and then hiring new people in a lot of these places. They're moving, bringing people who know the system with them, and then hiring. So what happens is, and I think this is what you're seeing in Atlanta now and in Georgia, is they take their politics with them, like we said, right? So you're going to get a lot of people, like I know Tesla put in paperwork to move to Texas as well. Tesla has Texas, and Tesla has a lot of Black people working for them that I know personally who are like, I might have to move to Texas, right? So what does that mean? They go to Texas, they're not only taking their money and their resources down there with them, but they're also taking their politics with them too. So that means once Tesla goes, it's going to be a little more blue. Once other corporations move to Texas, going to be a little more blue. You know what I mean? So I think that's one of the things that's going to happen. And I think it's going to open up for the Yankee territories, like you said, are going to just become bigger places and bigger platforms for big tech. because I don't think tech is going to the country. I think tech is just going to try to expand in California. Tech is going to expand in New York. Tech is going to expand in Florida. Tech is going to expand in those places because, you know, that's where a ton of their clients are, a bulk of, you know.
Well, yeah, but a lot what they're talking about now with tech, and it's interesting that you say this, because what I really think we're going to see is we're going to see a shift where we're going to see industry, right? We're going to see this hard type of industry in the South because of the land, right? There's far more land. So Amazon has now, you know, eclipsed Walmart as the retail giant. Well, where are they going? They're going to the South, where there's lots of land that they can scoop up, and they can move their product a lot faster, and then don't have the same level of tax burden. But what are we seeing right in the Midwest and the North? We're seeing, especially what we're seeing out of this stimulus plan, that this stimulus / COVID stimulus bill that Biden is proposing. We're seeing that there's going to be a lot of technology investment in the Midwest. So when we're talking about tech, another place that I really feel like we're going to start to see as a tech hub is going to be in Michigan. It's going to be around the University of Michigan, because tech needs an institution. It needs that institution influx, which is why, for the most part, Silicon Valley set up in the Valley, right? They have access to all of those universities that are in the Bay Area, right? From Berkeley to Stanford to, you know, as the top ones, and then Santa Clara, and then all of these other schools. And so what I really believe we're going to see when it comes to tech is we're going to see tech in the Midwest, but it's going to be surrounded around the University of Michigan. In Michigan, we're going to start seeing wind and solar and all other types of tech in that Midwest Pennsylvania type of area, replacing coal. And we're going to see a lot of the manufacturing return, right? Because we see that there's going to be issues, and we're going to see that in the South. And one thing I really want us to notice is that China is in a pickle. And China is in a pickle because they had flooding. So they lost a lot of their food source. Bill Gates has been reported to, I think he bought 100,000 acres or something ridiculous. Yep. As far as land. And so what I think we're going to see is we're going to see a agricultural resurgence as a country, and then because China is deeply in trouble. And so the soybean, you know, phenomenon, and the fact that soybean lasts a long time, the soybean phenomenon is going to get ready to flip itself on its head. So I think we're in for an entire restructuring, not just from we're looking at an entire restructuring from an economic perspective, from a racial perspective, and from a politics perspective.
So that's really interesting. So basically, all right, okay, Bill Gates and his Gates Foundation will have a hand in food, technology, and vaccinations. Interesting.
Very.
That's a whole other.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Let's not go down that rabbit hole.
We're not gonna go on down.
Right. Let's not go down that rabbit hole. But I calling it to our attention, though, right? That this understanding that there's this entire realignment that's happening right now, right before our eyes. And that is why I feel like politically we have to stay engaged so that we can demand certain things in this shift.
I think another thing, I'm glad we're moving in this conversation about growth and building, because I think it needs to give more people ideas like what industries are booming and how can people shift. So, you know, me being here in the States for a little while is that those who are truckers, the trucking industry is booming now, right?
Booming,
right? So now because of the pandemic, there's not a lot of, it used to be where you could, come through Mexico, go to the United States, Canada. There was a lot of, this international trade, travel, and transportation and movement within these 3 countries. But now with going on in these restrictions, so there's a complete hire. They're looking for truckers. They're looking for people who own trucks. I think that's an interesting industry. But also in the rebuilding, there is a slow push in terms of medium-sized cities and big towns. So as these people are moving out of California or New York, these Black and brown people are moving down south, they're looking for, where do I live, right? And a lot of these places simply do not have the infrastructure like in Atlanta or Houston. So there is going to be even a push to grow. So we even have the opportunity to move to these towns or, rebuild these towns. But in this reconstruction, I don't want things to happen like what happened in Atlanta, which to me was in a lot of ways a social cultural failure, in that there was for generations there is this clash between those who migrate and those who are the native. And so, you know, when I lived there was a very huge kind of, divide in
Yeah,
terms of
still.
It's
what.
still a divide, but for the I it's so funny that you mentioned this, because I have a homeboy that's down here, and he told me to shout him out on the clip, and so now he gets his shout out. One of my good friends, his name is Polo down here. He's a native. He's been here all his life.
Polo the
And
Don.
yeah, and we were having a
Like for
Polo
real,
2G.
like
Polo 2G.
oh, okay, Polo
And
2G.
Polo 2G, not Polo the Don, Polo 2G. And we were having this conversation about this, right? About like, are they resentful and just all of that. And he said at the beginning, many people were. He said, but now what has happened is that if you get too resentful, it's cutting off your money. And so you can stay resentful and broke, right? Like that was his thing. Like Polo 2G was like, you can stay resentful and stay broke, or you can understand that who's moving down here for the most part looks like us. And so then how do we figure out a way to make sure that we make this the strong Black city that we want it to be, right? And so I still think there's tensions. Absolutely, there's tensions, but there's so many people moving down here that it's becoming such a cultural melting pot that it's affecting your profitability.
Yeah, well, I think that is definitely something. I don't even think that there's been enough studies on Atlanta and how Atlanta has changed over the decades since, let's say, roughly since the 80s. Yeah, so I mean, I can't just use my personal experience, but from what I gauge and from what I know, there still is great tensions. And even if it is, even though if you cannot vocalize it publicly, there definitely is a lot of movement, silently, in terms of who gets access to resources, who's considered, those of power. So this is going to be really interesting. But one of the things that, for me, that highly disturbs me about Atlanta, I tell people all this time, I said, when I moved to Atlanta, I was like perplexed, right? My parents are from the South. I said, Atlanta is, to me, not a Southern city. It does not, in my opinion, other than the accents, the bones of what I see a Southern city is, I'm like, yo, where is it? But that's just me. So in terms of how we shift and move, and me talking to a lot of Black farmers, this goes to your point, Sharice. There's a lot of like, we want to collaborate, we want to build, we want to grow. We just want it to be done in a way in which our identities are both recognized in the process. So
right. Yeah.
So, all right. So moving forward, look, I'm in the hotel. I gotta keep my eyes and my ears open. Okay. So anyway, so I'm from the hood. I hear something. I'm okay. So anyway, so yeah. So any other thoughts? Even though Malcolm X and Martin King's teachings and advocacy were over 50 years ago, what are some things you feel that are still apply, or are still applicable today?
Well, first, I'm gonna talk to dear white people. Please stop with these same 2 or 3 Martin Luther King quotes y'all pull out your ass every birthday. You know what I mean? Like, please find some more, and then try to get to a bigger scope of who King was, because I feel like all the people who try to quote King, it's always the nonviolent. Basically, I feel like they're trying to tell Black people, calm your ass down. That's what I feel like. That's my personal take. And I'm like, I feel like all the people who make those darkness, only light can drive out darkness, it's like the same 3 that they always post, like, well, take the breadth of his whole life and understand when he was killed, he was not this well liked. You know what I mean? Like, understand when he was assassinated, he was not this tour de force that y'all make him out to be, and y'all act like y'all always was on his side, because if you over 60, you know what it was back then. So don't act like, you know what I'm saying? That's what it is now. So that's one thing. But to your actual question, I think some of the things are the things he started to do economically, right? When he started trying to get Black people to start pooling their money together. Like, I think that's something that we still need to try to do today. Malcolm X being against upward suasion and trying to tell us, like, no, let's separate and do our own thing and don't worry about it. I think that's something that could still be applicable to us today. Like, I think we would be smart to combine the things that Martin and Malcolm were doing to kind of make a perfect place for us, if you will, in regards to what we can do economically, what we can do socially. Because I think, as we spoke about on the other show, I think all these things work hand in hand. You need your Martins and you need your Malcolms. You know what I'm saying? You need the inside and you need that outside game. And so I think we need to continue to try to find ways to navigate what they were doing and make it applicable to what we're doing now.
So on this quote business, it's so funny that you mentioned this, because I was in a Clubhouse is popping now, y'all. Like, everybody wants to be fake woke on Clubhouse. So I've been asked to speak a couple of times, and I was in a room, and someone that was white said, "Well, what do we do as allies? What do we do? I said, let me tell you, I have an acronym for what you do. It's called HBAC, right? And it's hear, the HBACC. So hear the stories of people of color, and then believe them when they tell you those stories. Don't dismiss the stories because they're just unbelievable. Believe them when they tell you these stories. Then after you hear them and believe them, then admit to yourself that you've been living in a level of privilege, that you as a white person have a level of privilege. And that goes beyond a King quote. That goes beyond all of this, day of service and all this other stuff. That goes beyond all of that. Admit that, because the only way that we can move forward is if you admit that you have been living with a set of privilege. After you go on to admit, then go ahead and confess that. The fact that you've been living with privilege, go and confess that to your friends. Don't come over and talk to us. Don't give me no quotes. Go talk to your friends first. Confess to your friends that you and other people that look like you have lived with a set of privilege because of the skin tone that you have. And then after you do all of those things, then become committed to then removing the level of privilege that you've had. And I'm not saying go out and tar and feather yourself and burn yourself alive. I'm not saying any of those things. What I'm saying is that the way that we move forward in this moment is if you take acknowledgement, or if you acknowledge that that you learned yourself wrong, the way that you learned yourself was wrong. You were not the hero, you were the villain. And if we can't get past that point, then we will continue to get a recycling of King quotes every time his birthday rolls around, and forget that white congressman blocked his birthday inside of the Congress.
Yeah, and I tell people all the time, also, if you're going to be making those quotes, make sure, and I've seen it a few times today too, know the I Have a Dream speech, but also know about the letter from Birmingham. You know what I mean?
But not only that, that's not even the name of the speech. Like, we've named it the I Have a Dream speech, but if you read the speech from the beginning, I have a dream doesn't come to the end of the speech, right? Like, even if you want to name it the I Have a Dream speech, understand that everything, but we don't even have to get to the Birmingham jail letter, even though it's extremely important. We could just talk about the speech we could just talk about the I Have a Dream speech. Stop cutting the speech off. Go hear what was said at the beginning of the speech, why he then said, I have a dream, right? He said that because he laid out all of the social unrest, the level of the level of inequity inside of the political landscape, and from a social landscape, and the level of poverty that he was seeing all over the country. Let's be very clear, even just about that speech. So yeah, the letter of the Birmingham jail is important. Yes, that's very important. But let's talk about the front half of the speech that you don't ever want to talk about.
Amen.
And Chimamanda Adichie has this whole talk about the danger of the single story or the one narrative. And we've reduced King to just like this one narrative, but we've reduced even just the civil rights and understanding to just one person's narrative too, which is so dangerous. There are so many contemporaries that we don't even study. We've forgotten their names, and they equally must be honored. And I don't think that if we as Black people do not make America understand the force that pushed the civil rights, I think that's part of, and how do we, in terms of access the power that we need in order to move forward.
Kaya, to your point, especially the Black women, right? We do not highlight a lot of the Black women. When we talk about the SCLC and we talk about SNCC, we forget about the Freedom Riders. We do not talk about the Freedom Riders. And the Freedom Riders were extremely important in that movement because they highlighted a level of violence that hadn't been seen, right? There, like you said, there's several different narratives. And one of my favorite living legends that I love to talk to about this is Joyce Latner. Dr. Joyce Latner was the only female president at Howard University. They hired her to clean stuff up and then they let her on go. And she was an interim there. But I love talking to her about it because she was in SNCC and, you know, participated in the Freedom Rides. And she gives a totally different perspective about how they would lay the groundwork and then King would show up with the cameras. And then that he would then, or whoever he was with, or the clergy that he was with, or the Black men would get all this credit, not talking about the younger members and talking about the women.
You know, or the women, or the whole collective of women who were cooks, who sold fried chicken, collard greens, sweet potatoes, and pound cake that literally funded the movement. Or right. Fannie Lou Hamer, who had to create a whole Democratic Party within the Democratic Party of Mississippi. Or the farmers right. in Alabama, who really were the first Black Panther Party that was created because the white bloc of the Democratic Party was so racist that they wouldn't allow them to vote. And they and they were so active let me say this. And so the white establishment were so devious and that when these Black farmers and sharecroppers began to organize, they kicked them off the land. So these people were lined up and living along highways so they could vote. Right. So
right. And that's in Lowndes County. So let's be very clear.
County, yeah.
In Lowndes County, Alabama, the Black Panther, the actual symbol came from Lowndes County, and they wrote and they asked, can we use this as the symbol of the party? And they said, sure. And I remember meeting Dr. Charles Hamilton, who spoke about this. He has a room at the DuSable Museum in Chicago, and he spoke about this and the letter that was received by students, where they have a conversation around the symbol of the Black Panther. So you're exactly right. The very first Black Panther Party was actually in Lowndes County, Alabama, and they came up with the symbol. So it's just all of these things that get reduced by one King quote, right? We'll gravitate toward King quote, and one of my favorite King quotes actually is that if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And I think right now what is happening is that people are falling for anything. So as soon as, when we saw this level of social unrest, people fell for anything. Put up the black square, let's go for that. We're in solidarity. Amazon put up a statement on their website. Everyone's, in this quest to stand for something, you fall in for everything.
That's a really good point. And this is not a King's quote. I always will love Ida B. Wells Barnett, who said something like, if white people know that every Black household had a Winchester rifle sitting at the front door, they would think twice about running up in their spot, which also includes the cops, right? So that's like one of my favorite as well, which I think is what we're seeing now is that now that we know, and it's being very quiet, because they're since January 6th, I'm going back to that, since January 6th, there has been, daily these updates about what is going on, but there is an obvious gap of information. I don't know if you are all recognizing it. They still have not properly released all the people who have been involved. What they have admitted to is that all the logistics on that day were ran by, like the walkie-talkies, the mapping, where to go, were ran by current or active and retired military and law enforcement officers, so, right, but they haven't released that, right? So if now we know, it has been without a shadow of a doubt that these people are occupying our law enforcement and our defense, where does it stand as Black folk? Where does it stand as brown folk?
To me, so this is what struck me the more I stayed in DC, right? The more I stayed in DC, and the more I listened to friends of mine that are on the Hill, the more that I listen to people that are in the apparatus, right, who are trying to sniff people out, the more I'm of the belief, and this is just my belief, I have no evidence for this, I'm more of the belief that they allowed it to happen so that they could actually try to really root out or even identify who's really in. And the reason that I say that is because they had so much evidence, right? So I do think that a part of them didn't believe that they could have been this successful. That's one. But I also think that they knew it, and they knew that if they didn't allow it to erupt to this point, that it was going to be so much more difficult to go after those that they knew were in, right? Because the level and the preponderance of evidence that's necessary to try and charge people is so high. And the fact that if people knew that they were on to them, that they would go too far underground and wouldn't find them. So the more I talk to people, the more I'm like, you know what? It was too much. It was too much information circling around. It was too many people who knew. And so, what I really truly believe that it was false information that was given. There was some. I won't say double agents, but I do believe that there was a lot of misinformation given, so they could try to sniff out some of these trails. Which is why I also think that there's a gap in reporting as far as what they're saying and what's actually happening.
Dang, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the reason that you're seeing this big gap in the information and the way that it's been reported is because I think it's actually tied to some bigger fish that they're not ready to let out yet as well, right? I think they're trying to figure out how they're going to spin this story that you had active Senate and Congress members who were actually involved in this thing too. And they trying to figure out how to do it, because if they report this the way it actually happened, they're going to have to expel a lot of people, and they're going to have a lot of special elections, which they'll probably lose right now because their party has convinced people that voting is a fraud. So they're losing voters to come out because they told people voting, there's fraud in voting. So it's like they had ended up working against their own self-interest. Excuse me. So I think that's why you're starting to see like little pieces of this here, because the FBI, the stuff that, and the FBI don't leak anything on accident. Like, one thing we know, the FBI is very meticulous and purposeful with the information they let people have. So when they let out, like, we got a couple of names of some people who gave tours to the insurrectionists that were congressmen, that was on purpose. You know what I'm saying? So I think they're really trying to take a delicate situation and handle it delicately for the moment, because it's going to be a shitstorm to come very soon.
Yeah, Dane, to your point, right? Let's remember back in the summer, the end of the summer, beginning of the winter, end of summer, like I think it was like fall, where there was the plot to then capture the governor
Michigan,
of Michigan, right? And kill her. They were able to thwart the plan. And they were able to thwart the plan. It's the same group of folks. They're already tapped in. That's my thing. They were able to thwart that because they were a lot closer to being able to carry that out than they would like them to be, and so they shut it down, right? I think in this scenario, they knew it was going to happen. They allowed it to happen so that they can start sniffing folks out. Because how did you have the same level of intelligence that you used to shut down her being kidnapped and killed is the same level of intelligence that you had here, and we as a public know it. So, and then again, like I said, folks that are inside the apparatus, they had access to the same information. So why didn't this one get shut down? So to me, to your point, Dave, I think they're bigger fish out here. They're bigger fish out there. And to get the public's approval of going after the bigger fish, we allowed some level of violence. I don't think they thought it was going to be as bad as it was. I don't think they thought it was going to be as close of a call as it was, because they underestimate white violence time and time again, right? And so I think they underestimated it, and it got too bad. But I also believe that they allowed a lot of this to happen so that they could start sniffing out who it really is. Because in the transition, because remember, Biden's made it very clear, I don't want anybody who guarded Trump guarding me. I don't want anybody, right? Kamala has made it clear, not one single person that was on a Trump detail needs to be on my detail. So to me, that lets me know they've been known. They've been known that there's folks that are inside, and now how do I sniff them out? One, how do I get the public behind me to sniff them out? And then how do I have enough evidence to actually try them or do something about what I know, what I do know?
I think added to that is that even though they have all this level of intelligence, they still don't know how to deal with the problem, because the problem is so huge and large that they simply, what happens when all the numbers come out and they say roughly about 30 to 40% of those in military, white military and law enforcement are connected What are you going to do when 30 or 40% of your defense has got to be snatched or they're tagged for being racist? There isn't anything in place in order to properly deal with it, because I'm gonna use your saying, to your point, Cherise, because they've been underestimating, they've been allowing this to go on for so long, and it is so interwoven into American culture that it has not been adequately dealt with. So with that, so it's a destroy and build and destroy situation. So they know that they're going to have a whole bunch of hiring that's going to go on. There's going to be a whole bunch of people maybe forced into resignation or retiring, but they still must deal with all of these young, I'm saying nationalists, because, I don't know about y'all, but I remember kind of like this quote, oh, all of these racists are just going to die out.
Yeah.
Well,
no, they're making new ones.
No.
Right.
All right. Yes, exactly. So that's not true. That is, I don't know why we were saying that.
Well, also, Kaya, too, I also think that one of the reasons that they haven't been able to properly deal with it, because like you said, we have these reports that said they had already infiltrated, reports by the FBI, reports by, very, people that we should understand, have the information. We had the FBI had said they infiltrated a bunch of law enforcement already. They had infiltrated the military. But the problem is, no matter how many of those reports came out, the government at large did not see them as a threat.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, not even see them as a threat. They felt like they can manage the threat. That's, to me, I believe that during the Trump administration, folks that are in intelligence started ringing the alarm, right? Like I really believe that they started to see it to be a threat. But by the time that white folks really started to feel like it was a threat, it was too late. That's one. And then two, like you said, Dave, it was out of control. So they're like, oh, we have a problem. And so now that we have this problem, what do we do? To Kaia's point, right? We just can't ex-nay a third of our, a third or,
right.
of our
the police force and them,
right? So what do we do? So what I truly believe is that they had underestimated them so long, but it reared its head so broadly during this Trump administration, it put them in a quagmire as far as what do we go and where do we go and what do we do? And if you know anything about developing nations, when you have this level of infiltration, when loyalists to particular regimes, you let them fight it out. You let them shoot it out, right? And to me, that's what we're doing. To be quite honest, what I really feel like what we're doing right now is we're letting them shoot it out, right? Because I mean, people turning dime on these folks so fast. It's like, it's crazy, right? There's one. I don't know if you guys heard about the white woman who flew there on her jet.
Yep.
And now she wants a pardon, or this other significant other turned his wife in and was like, yeah, she stole Nancy Pelosi's laptop and tried to sell it to Russia, but that didn't fall through. Like, these folks is turning on these people. They throwing up dimes left and right. And so I truly believe, I'm not saying that, I guess this is my point. We're in this for a lot longer than January 20th, right? We're going to be in this space for a lot longer than people realize. And I don't know if any of you guys watched Kamala's special from CNN. It made it very apparent to me that they understand, that she and he both understand that they're going to be in this for a long time, and that they do not want the public attention to be on it. They want the public attention to be on other things, because I truly believe it's going to get guerrilla very fast.
Well, I think part of the conundrum that military, defense, and intelligence agencies are in is that, how do you rehabilitate all three agencies that have roots or origins that are very sordid and racist in itself?
They're gonna have to really, they have to really try to find a way to incentivize Black people and brown people to come in and start to take these positions from a PR standpoint. They have to have that happen. Just like when the whole Capitol thing happened, they made the Black woman the captain. And I was like, oh, this is the setup, but I see it. But you know what I mean? But they're going to have to really try to find a way to incentivize Black people to come into these places. And that also means they're going to have to start to move Black people into higher positions than they would have usually moved them into a lot faster, because now you have to put Black people in positions of power if you want, from a PR standpoint, for Black people to say, okay, cool, I'm gonna come rock with that.
But Dame, to your point, that's exactly why if you look at the confirmations, Joe Biden has lined up the confirmations for almost all people of color the first week. He's lined up. I mean, the level of legislation that's going to be coming at rapid fire. I mean, it's going to be, I mean, you should see them right now in DC, the way that they are lining up this legislation. People are burning the midnight oil. To your exact point about getting folks in there, almost every person of color is all the.
You lost your sound.
Sharice, we lost your sound, Sharice, your sound.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
They're in line first to be confirmed, right? All these people of color leading these agencies are in line first to be confirmed in that Senate. So I think you're exactly right about, you know, from a PR perspective, but also from a we setting a new tones perspective, right? Like, this is who the boss is. Get with it or get gone, right? And I think that there's going to be so many people that are going to be uncomfortable, and I also think what we're going to see is a lot of forced retirements.
Right. I mean, and I mean, this is long overdue. But the question still remains is that even though the racial demographics are going to look different, is that still going to spell out to something that, you know, those who have existed on the lowest stratums of, you know, the socioeconomic totem pole, are they going to benefit? So that is still something that we have to consider in all of this, because, you know, as I said, all your skin folk and your kinfolk, right? So, and as we know, what was that? You know, Biden had that meeting with some civil rights folk early on, and they were asking him if he was going to invoke executive order in order to reverse some things that Trump did, implement some things that are needed. And, you know, he said, you know, I'm not going to be doing these things because I'm trying to protect the Constitution. So are we going to have Constitution protectors, or are we going to have people that really are about reimagining and reinvesting in communities?
But the biggest reason, so I want to be clear on that, right? The reason he says that I don't want to do an executive order is because an executive order can then be overturned. And I know, first, there's two things. I know that I'm not running for a second term, right? I know that I'm not running for a second term. I know that Kamala's coming behind me, and let's just be real. In the state of tension that we are right now, can she win in 4 years? Right. So it's this idea that I need to get legislation. I can't, when I basically have the House and the Senate on my side, because Kamala is the tiebreaker in the Senate, I need to put legislation down versus an executive order. There are some things I can do with executive order that can undo some of Trump's executive orders, but I can't get into the position that Obama did with immigration and then do it based upon executive order, because then we're going to be in a far larger problem, because they can just undo what we've done. And so that's, I think, a lot of the teeth of it is, I got to get legislation on the books, which is why we as Black people have to push to make sure that the legislation that we care about gets in the books and gets the priority.
But legislation is not permanent too, as well. I mean, it is not, I mean, executive orders can be flip-flop, maybe faster than legislation, right? So, I mean,
yeah,
it is
and but let's also remember that an executive order is the interpretation of a law that's already on the books, right?
Okay,
so let's also remember that executive order is not the law. It's an interpretation of the law that's already on the books. And what Joe has made very clear is that the law limits him for what he really wants to try to get accomplished.
Okay. Now I could have that, but you know, the way he was talking to those people on the phone was straight disrespectful, Joe. Okay. Yeah, you know, I was like, this is very kind of mob boss, go sit your ass down in the corner. And okay, anyway, so moving forward. But I think this is a really great segue into just a couple of more things that you see now with all that has gone on. What are some things that are definite that we need to implement or that we need to push for in this new administration, this coming administration?
For me, I think some of the things that we need to push for that I think can actually happen quickly. We talked about student loan debt forgiveness, Medicare for all, or the option for Medicare for all, and
The
free
public
college.
option.
Yeah, for
The
the public
public option.
option. Yeah, and free college education. I think those are some things that can immediately set us on a better course and help with our financial situation and help us to move into a different place financially. Like, because if you do those three things, it helps three generations at the same time.
Well, to Dame, to build on what you're saying, we already have the foundation from a legislation perspective to do all three of those, right? We have the foundation for how to make college free at state institutions. New York has done it. California has done it. So if you are from a family that's making less than $125,000 a year, we already know what that looks like, and we can get that done. When it comes to and we can supplement it, right? The states can enact their own plans, and then it can be supplemented with the expansion of the Pell Grant that then allows people, instead of getting $6,000 roughly, to get $12,000, which covers almost all the average tuition per state, right? Because state tuition roughly varies from anywhere from $10,000 to $12,000 per year. So to me, those things that we already have the foundation for. I think the biggest thing for me, really, that we need to do quickly that can be done is housing. And housing, to me, is something that that we need to do quickly, because it's going to spur jobs, right? It's going to spur and allow people in a pandemic to quickly go back to work. We have a failing infrastructure, right? We have a failing infrastructure, not just from roads, bridges, and that perspective, but we have a failing infrastructure when it comes to housing, especially these government housing projects. Since we know that we are not kicking people out of these housing projects, then we need to have a serious conversation about how do we massively make these renovations that they need, because they've been living in structures that were erected in the 50s that have not been adequately updated. So for me, what we know is that's where most of us that are in the Yankee territories, or still in the Yankee areas, that's where most Black and brown people live. And to me, that's the next thing that really needs to be tackled. It is housing. And to me, that's something else that can be done fairly quickly with the redirection, or with the direction that they have inside of those stimulus dollars. The other thing that I think needs to be done very quickly is we need to level the playing field for Black farmers. And the reason that we need to do that very quickly, and I think that we can get that done fairly quickly as well, is because we need to understand what's going in our food and who is controlling our food. And if we do not have a voice at that table, and I'm not saying that Black farmers are going to overrun the market, or that we're going to have a huge voice at the table, because agribusiness is a huge business. However, I think that if we can get Black farmers back to the playing field, and we create more sustainable pipelines back to those farms, then Black folks can really start owning their power, because we can then own our power from an education perspective. We can own our power from what we're putting into our bodies, and we can also reduce the level of environmental racism that we see in our communities.
I also wanted to add, in terms of you know what, Sharice, you took everything out of my head, and you just you said it. I'm just just the food, clothing, and shelter, but infrastructure. I think we also must deal with, in addition to what all you said, water, access to clean water, especially with the Flint, Michigan, Flint, Michigan coming back. And the former governor being charged with the misdemeanor, mind you, which is not going to get it, but being charged with a misdemeanor for purposefully poisoning a whole city in order to have monetary gain. But Flint, Michigan is not the
but
only
not that
city.
much monetary gain, though.
Right.
Let's be clear. I don't think it was about monetary gain. I think that what I really think it was about poisoning Black people. It was about poisoning Black. I don't really think. No, I just think it was straight up. No, I think it's straight up murder, because the amount of money that they were actually saving,
wasn't a lot.
It was negligible. I mean, from a state budget perspective, I mean, Detroit lost more money than they were going to save. Like, let's not even. I mean, from a bond perspective, you could have made that up on percentages. Like, the money, I really truly believe it was murder. And I don't think the charges for Snyder were enough. But I do think they're going to be able to get him on these charges. And again, that's what I'm learning more and more about the law. It's less about what you actually did. It's more about what we can actually prove.
That really is the politics of the law. It's not necessarily the law itself, but it's the politics of the law, because we know that a lot of prosecutors won't come after you unless it's a win, or the feds. Like, it's like if you're indicted by the feds, that it's a 90% chance that, you're going to be found guilty. So that's the politics of it. That's why I got to have this criminal defense attorney on, Fareed Hayat, that talks about, he has this really wonderful course that tells people always fight your case, never take a plea deal, because it's highly likely you'll come out, winning more than you will come out losing. But also, Sharice, but to your point, I want to say that the changing of the water source in Flint was also connected to fracking companies in the area. So even though it was billed as we are saving money in the state of Michigan, I think that Snyder and his cronies took some backdoor deals in order for some fracking companies. So that's something else that's part of
and since they took the money for fracking, somebody's going to have to get this poor water, and who else to get the poor water than Black folks? Because let's remember they set this up. This wasn't a let's just switch the pipes. They established an entire infrastructure by denying Black people access to their democracy, to then be able to be sustainable in the losing, because they knew as soon as folks started realizing the water wasn't safe, that they were going to have problems. So they changed the entire democratic structure to ensure it. So that's why I said to you that for me, it was just plain all out murder, because I took the back deal, fracking deal, right? Now somebody's going to have to get less water. I know it's not going to work. I know that it's going to be, it's not going to be looked upon favorably. So who can we get and who's not going to complain? And okay, Black folks, but how do we insulate ourselves so that we can make this money and at least get out of office before we have to deal with whatever we have to deal with?
I know, Dan, you were saying something about Flint last week. You wanted to add something to that?
I mean, no, y'all pretty much covered it. Just that, it's come down to, the cases, and I think 12 people arrested. It was a criminal enterprise. You know what I mean? It was like some organized crime stuff, the way that
with two Negroes.
Yeah,
two Black men.
the people that they took down, like 12 people were arrested. I'm like, oh, this was like some real organized crime mafioso. And like you said, Kaya, going to the fracking, that backdooring to get the money, and Black people having to be the beneficiaries of this terrible thing that happened. You know what I mean? And I do think the charges there should be more charges. I think it should be much more drastic, because now we are in a place where when things like this happen and the insurrection happened, you have to make examples out of all of this white violence, because that was white violence against Black bodies to me as well.
With complicit Black people.
With complicit Black people in both cases, right? With complicit Black people in both cases. So you have to make examples of all of these people, because it cannot stand, it cannot continue, or next it will be an insurrection from us.
Interesting. So, I think water is an issue. Environment is going to be an issue. I also want to go back to food. They're part of, in terms of not only in addition to dealing with the severe discrimination within the agribusiness or the agricultural industry, there must be something dealt with in terms of these main cash crops that have totally made a lot of the soil, that have made it either toxic or have, we're eating fruits and vegetables, but a lot of them aren't nutrient rich, right? So, I mean, we're producing, every generation we're getting sicker and sicker and sicker. So one of the things I think is very dope that I learned working at Black Farmers Index, that a lot of the Black farmers don't use pesticides. They use natural growing methods or organic growing methods. And then even the native, like the native folk have been storing their seeds, their heirloom seeds as well. So in us talking about food and what food will look like, we do need to get back to these growing methods that, that don't destroy the soil and don't kill people around it, like Monsanto, and all of its pesticides and chemicals that are alleged that they cause cancer. All right, so we are going to end actually on a light, funny note. And we talked about this, but all of us have been living in the pandemic in some way, shape, or form. And I wanted to talk about what it's like living in the pandemic. co-parenting, and trying to date. I've heard some really hilarious stories, but just want to know your thoughts on that, and any advice or any questions you want to put out there. Maybe some folk can help us understand how to navigate it.
Well, just to be honest, I want to make sure I put this on record because we are making history in the moment, and I want to be able to look back on this. It's been hell. Um,
Yeah, I mean, in me, in my just kind of casual, asking folk around, it seems that there's just a lot of kind of casual porn being made these days.
Zoom porn.
Zoom porn,
Zoom porn.
boom, boom, porn. You know, and this, the conversation, and people just, just trying to really figure out how do you, especially those, I'm 45, right? So, I mean, the people my age mates, they're between like roughly between 35 and let's say about 55. And I mean, I think that's that age range. If you're not married, you really seriously want to connect. People are like, damn, I was just about to try and have a baby. All of these things have been put on hold. So the question is that how do we kind of move forward where life has stopped? So one of the things I've heard that has been, being implemented, they were like, you remember back when HIV/AIDS, you had to show your card. Now you got to show your coronavirus status. Like those are some of the things that are being, implemented. So
Girl, all my married friends, girl, my timeline is filled with Corona babies. I mean, my timeline on Facebook is filled with Corona babies. I mean, every time I look up, folks who in my mind have no business having no more children. Every time I look up, it's somebody pregnant talking about he'll be here in February. Oh yeah, so you was pregnant during the Corona. Got it. It's very apparent what you were doing.
What the brother? What the brother? I want to know what the brother's saying. What are the brothers saying? How is it? Well, it's a cheap date now. They don't have to worry about paying.
Yeah, they said it's a cheap date. A couple of my single friends have told me they said it's a cheap date, but it's very interesting because now protection includes a corona test. You know what I mean? Like he's like, even if you want to go, and spend some time with somebody, it's like all this preparation. And then if you have older parents that you want to be around, now you got to quarantine from them after you go see your new significant other for someone new. You're like, so it's all these other things that I never, I wouldn't have thought about until I talked to my friends who were dating, and they were like, yeah, man. So you do a couple of dates on Zoom first. You know what I'm saying? Y'all get to know each other. Like y'all talk on the phone, talk on DM, and then you move to Zoom. And the first couple of dates on Zoom. And after that, you try to move to an in-person date that can be safe. And then after the in-person date, then maybe you can get to come to the house. But then that's a whole other thing, because if they have kids at the house, then you can't go to the house. And you know what I mean? Because you don't want to expose anyone in your family to this. And like you said, so between the ages of 35 and 55, a lot of people have different living situations. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people have it where they live with their younger kids or their older kids or
extended family,
and vice versa. You know what I mean? So
that's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. Like, and so in having those conversations, I have said I am glad I found out in this pandemic that I actually like my wife. I always knew I loved her, but we really like each other.
But that's real. But Dane, that's real, because a lot of marriages are breaking up. So what I'm saying is two things: either y'all found out y'all loved each other more and y'all best friends, and now you having a baby you shouldn't have had, or the marriage is over because now you didn't been sitting in the house with each other all this time and you good. Luckily, I was in transition, moving from 2020 was just a year of transition. Like, I started the year in California. My sister bought a house down in Georgia. So then I went to DC for my son's birthday, went early because I didn't know what was going to happen with coronavirus. Drove down here to my sister's house in Atlanta, stayed here during the summer. Then went to Baton Rouge to, start teaching. So luckily I've been okay in that department as far as dating, because every place I've gone, except for Baton Rouge, because I'm new there, I've already had me a piece of work there. So I've been straight. Like, I haven't had to worry about those kind of situations. I just call up who I know, and who's taking it like I'm taking it. And as far as seriousness, and then, we'll get a room or whatever else. And that's what it's mostly been. Going to a hotel, door dashing the food in, and then spending the time then at the room, so that I'm not then exposing everybody else around me to whatever.
I'm glad you said that. Well, one of the things in terms of talking to my friends who are dating is their whole thing is that if you are not interested in like long-term commitment in marriage, I'm not even talking to you at this point. Because if I'm trying to if I'm trying to have something and you get me sick, I have to want to marry you in order
Yeah.
for, you know what I'm saying? So
The
people
stakes are
like,
higher.
the stakes are
The
mad
stakes are
higher,
higher.
right?
Yeah.
Right. So that's what I've heard. And then this is what I'm seeing at the hotels. The hotels have become like kind of like the club for a lot of the young
Right.
folk. So it's like, okay, we can't go to the bar anymore. We can't go out. So I'm seeing like groups of like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people going into one room, and that becomes their party. So there's these like mini super spreaders, you know, to these young
Yeah.
20-year-olds and, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying, teens and stuff like that. Hotels are cheaper. You know what I'm saying? All you need to do is have somebody old enough to go get you know what I'm saying, a little drink. Of course, it's a lot of weed. You know what I'm saying? Where I was, it was just like all perimeters and stuff. I was
Right.
like,
It was a wharf.
all I need to
of
do,
smell.
all I need to do was sit in the lobby to get high. So, you know, so these are some of the things that, you know, I think are going to be really interesting. I'm glad you said the pandemic babies. Also, I think another thing that they're talking about is even like issues with sexual disease. And these things that are popping up that are not being properly treated as a result of. And so there's another super strain of some kind of,
It's
you
like
know,
super gonorrhea is cracking out. Yeah.
Yes.
Gonorrhea with a cape.
And a machete.
Right.
That clap. That clap.
Because a lot of sex work is going on too, because people need money. So you have an increase of also these kind of like private strip things. I remember they used to do that in high school. You know, I'm talking about Dame. We went to the same high school.
Yeah, y'all was wild. No, I went to the old days. I went to a little, you know, all girls school. We wasn't like that.
Yeah, no, they used to have these. I mean, I swear for God on my mama, you know, who probably might see this. I never went to, but I heard about these like strip daytime parties. But anyway, so I mean, people are being very.
Dave must have been there a few of them. That's why he cracking up like that, because he was probably the DJ. That was probably why. Dave was probably the DJ on the ones and the twos.
I plead the fifth.
This also brings up this other thing. This also brings up this other issue in actually speaking to like younger, like college age and younger, just 18, like their understanding of courtship and socialization is radicalized or is going to be radically different in terms of, you know, them may not having one or what do they have to do, you know, which was the same thing when people were young when 9/11 hit, you know, and them not knowing what the world was like before 9/11.
Well, so it's funny that you say that, right? Because I'm at HBCU and because I'm one of the youngest, I am the youngest faculty in my department and really on the 4th floor in my building. So a lot of young people come to have those types of talks with me all the time. Like, Dr. Nelson, what do you think I should do? And I'd be looking like, you don't want no advice from me. I mean, I might not be the one. So what I'm really seeing a lot of them doing is going like one way or the other way, right? Like, now we got to be boyfriend and girlfriend and we gonna be locked up. You know, if you serious about like us courting, now you got to be at my house. You know, they all almost turning into like these pseudo marriages really with one another. And so it's either they're going, you know, that way, like, you know, we gonna be locked in here in this together, or they're going to, you know, the total opposite way of like abstinence and back up. So it's really like I would say these very bipolar existences. I don't see as much, you know, hooking up as I've seen previously in college culture amongst them, because, you know, they're really serious. And I think the other thing is, especially at where I am, is that they were promised that if they took these things seriously, if they were able to keep the numbers down and all of these things, that they were going to be able to have football in the spring, that they were going to be able to have a lot of the things that they missed. And so a lot of them are taking this seriously, and a lot of the student leaders are taking it seriously because they want to be able to have some of the events that they were looking forward to this spring, where it's going to be warmer and we can do things outside.
All right. So we are at the end. I really appreciate this conversation. Final thoughts. We're going to go to Dane first. What are your final thoughts on this conversation as we end MLK Day?
As we end MLK Day, my final thoughts are, make sure you go out there and try to be the change that you want to see, and make sure you support Black businesses. Like I've tried to make it a super special effort to support at least 3 to 4 Black businesses a week on top of my regular stuff that I have mailed to me on a regular. But like if it's a restaurant, if it's even a what you call that, when you get your papers notarized, a notary, get a notary, all of that. Try to get as many Black people to do services for you as you can, because that's the way that we are going to survive and we are going to thrive. And I think that, that economic base will be the beginning of a lot of other things that we want to try to fix. That's my final thoughts.
I will simply leave us with this. In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. Dr. King. And so I leave that, I leave with my final thoughts being that, because be careful, take notice, I should say, not be careful, take notice to who's being silent right now, and decide what you're going to do about the folks that are around you that are being silent. Decide what you're going to do. And I know for me that I'm going to create distance between those who are silent in these moments of social unrest, in these moments of a racialized pandemic. I am making sure that I'm calling people to the carpet. And if they're not about the liberation of Black folk, I'm good on you.
And I just want to say that, in the great words of Nip, stay safe and stay dangerous. Driving down here from Baltimore on the 95, I saw a convoy of about 40 to 60 marked and unmarked NYPD vehicles coming for the inauguration. And then after that, I saw military fleets coming to the area. So if you live in this area, please stay safe. But also be vigilant if something happens. And for those of you who want to come down here and be part of another coup, boo-boo for you. Thank you for another weekly check-in. I am Kaya Shivers, talking to the illustrious, brilliant Dr. Sharice Janae Nelson, as I always do, and young Dame Crawford. I'll be talking to you guys later.
If you wanna see good news, you don't see on regular TV. From another perspective, something relative to your needs. And we gonna have deep subjects, and we gonna turn the lens. And there's no topic we won't skip. So please don't miss weekly, yeah.